My name is Renee. I was 38 years old when my husband of 11 years slapped me across the face in front of my colleagues, my supervisor, and every person who had ever watched me hold our life together without complaint. He did it outside, in the daylight, at an event celebrating work I had built from nothing. And when it happened, his mistress was standing close enough to watch. She looked satisfied. He looked free. What neither of them knew was that I had already spent 3 days building something they couldn't see coming. He thought I was the woman who would absorb it. He had no idea I was already the woman who had decided what came next. Let me tell you how I got here. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. I packed his lunch the same way I had for 11 years. Turkey on wheat, mustard only, the crusts cut because Derek said they made the bread go stiff by noon, a small bag of pretzels, a clementine he'd probably ignore. I did it on autopilot, hands moving, coffee brewing, the refrigerator humming its one low note in the quiet of a Tuesday morning. And I did not know, not yet, that this was the last one I'd ever make him. I know now. I didn't know then. That's the thing about a normal morning. It doesn't announce itself as the last one. It just looks like all the others. My name is Renee Calloway. I'm 38 years old. I manage large-scale construction renovation projects for a mid-size firm, the kind of work where a single miscalculation can cost 6 figures and a single missed deadline can cost a contract. I hold 12 moving parts in my head at once without breaking a sweat. I track budgets, manage crews, navigate inspectors who want to be difficult, and clients who want the impossible. I do not fall apart under pressure. I also held my marriage together the same way, methodically, quietly, calling it love. 5 years ago, Derek's contracting business collapsed. Bad timing, he said. A market correction. A partner who pulled out at the wrong moment. All of it may have been true. None of it changed what came next. Which was me. I was what came next. I turned down a spot in an MBA program I'd been working toward for 2 years. Deferred it, I told myself, the way you lie to yourself when you're protecting someone else's pride. I transferred to a position closer to home so he didn't have to manage pickup and drop-off for the dog and the dry cleaning and the contractor calls while he was rebuilding. I absorbed a salary reduction that still hasn't fully recovered. I made myself smaller so he'd have more room to grow back. I didn't say any of that out loud at the time. That's not who I am. I just did what needed doing and kept moving forward. You know what I called that back then? Partnership. Funny word for something that only runs one direction. I sealed the lunch bag and set it on the counter by his keys, right where he'd see it. That's when I caught it. Something off in the air near his jacket, draped over the back of a kitchen chair. Derek wore the same cologne for 7 years, cedar and something clean, almost like rain. I bought him that bottle every Christmas. I knew that smell the way you know the sound of your own front door. This wasn't that. This was sweeter, warmer, something with a floral base that didn't belong in my kitchen. I didn't say anything. Derek was still upstairs. I stood there with my coffee and I filed it away in the back of my mind the way I file a budget discrepancy. Noted, dated, waiting for context. I was good at waiting for context. There's a memory I keep returning to even now. Our 7th anniversary. A corner table at this little Italian place we couldn't really afford. Red checked tablecloth, candle burned halfway down. Derek reached across and covered my hand with his and said, "You make everything possible, Renee. You know that? Everything." He meant it. I believe he meant it. I remember thinking that whatever hard years we'd come through, this man saw me clearly, saw what I gave, saw who I was. I almost let that memory talk me out of what I was already starting to feel. Almost. My hands went still on my coffee mug. I set it down. The thing about noticing everything is that eventually you can't unknow what you've noticed. The cologne was wrong. The Thursday evenings had been wrong for months. Derek and his contractor networking group that had no names, no faces, no stories attached to it. Not one anecdote from 11 years of a man who loved to talk about his work. I hadn't pushed. I told myself I trusted him. What I actually did was trust the version of him I needed to believe in. There's a difference. It took me longer than it should have to learn that. I rinsed my mug. I picked up my bag. I had a site walkthrough at 8 and a budget review at 10, and a crew lead who needed talking off a ledge about a permit delay. And I was not going to stand in my own kitchen picking apart a smell I couldn't name. I would deal with it later. I was always dealing with things later. My phone buzzed on the counter, a calendar notification. I picked it up, expecting a meeting reminder. It was from Derek's shared calendar, the one we'd set up 3 years ago to manage our schedules. A new entry added that morning. Not by me. Dinner. Table for 2. Riverfront Grill, 7 p.m. My name was not on it. I did not call him. That's the part people always ask about first. Didn't you want to call him? Didn't you want to know right then? No, I didn't. Calling Derek meant giving Derek a chance to explain, and I wasn't ready to listen to an explanation. I was ready to see. So I left work at 5:30, drove home, changed out of my work clothes, and was back in my car by 6:20. I pulled into the Riverfront Grill parking lot at 6:41 and found a spot near the far end, angled just right, clear sightline to the entrance. Engine off, hands in my lap. I sat there in the dark of a Tuesday evening, like a woman with absolutely nowhere better to be. At 7:08, Derek walked through the front door. She was beside him, not touching, but close. The kind of close that doesn't happen between people who are still figuring out where the edges are. This was a proximity built from practice, from knowing each other's pace, from having walked side by side enough times that the distance between them was automatic, comfortable, already agreed upon. Her name, I would learn later, was Vivian Price. She was younger than me by maybe 6 or 7 years, dressed like the evening was a celebration, laughing at something before they even cleared the hostess stand. Derek was laughing too, his shoulders loose, his whole posture easy, in a way I hadn't seen at home in longer than I cared to calculate. They were seated by the window. Of course they were. I could see them clearly from where I sat, the warm restaurant light catching the glassware, the two of them leaning in like the table was small and the night was long, and there was nowhere else either of them needed to be. My hands went still on the steering wheel. That was all. No shaking, no sound, just a stillness that moved from my hands up through my arms and settled somewhere behind my sternum like a stone dropping to the bottom of deep water. I watched for 4 minutes. I know it was 4 because I checked my phone when I arrived, and I checked it again before I started the car. 4 minutes was enough. 4 minutes told me everything that 11 years had obscured. I drove home. I made myself a bowl of soup from a can, tomato, which I ate standing over the sink because sitting down felt like surrendering to something I wasn't ready to name yet. Then I poured a glass of water, carried it to the couch, and called my best friend Tasha Odom, who has been a licensed paralegal at a family law firm for going on 9 years, and who has known me since we were 19 years old, sharing a 2-small dorm room and 2 strong opinions. She picked up on the second ring. "Tell me what you saw," she said. She already knew from my voice that this was not a casual call. I saw enough. A beat of quiet. "What are you going to do?" "I haven't decided yet." I set my water glass down on the coffee table. "But I'm going to know everything before I do anything." Tasha didn't try to talk me into feeling it faster than I was ready to. That's the thing about a friendship that old. She knew the difference between me needing to process and me needing to move. Right now, I was doing the first thing so I could be ready for the second. We stayed on the phone. I pulled up the joint banking app while she talked me through what to look for. You know what I found? Let me tell you what I found. 31 Thursday withdrawals in the last 6 months. Cash. between $400 and $800 each, every single Thursday. The contractors' networking group ran on a very consistent budget, apparently. I scrolled back through each one, and the number kept climbing. Not just the dollar amounts, but the count, week after week, regular as a utility bill. I did the rough math in my head. My jaw locked. I'd worked overtime 3 separate months this year because I said we needed a cushion. I'd said we. I'd believed we. And here was where the cushion went. Drawn out in cash every Thursday, fed into something that had nothing to do with us and everything to do with her. I remembered, and I tried not to linger on it, the early years, saving in little envelopes for things we wanted. Derek's handwriting on a yellow envelope. Someday fund. I bought into that completely, every bit of it. I set the phone face down on my knee and breathed once, slowly, through my nose. Tasha. I'm here. How far back do these go? That's exactly what I'm saying. Her voice was calm and very precise. Before you do anything, you need to look at what's in his name that isn't in yours. I reached over and opened my laptop. The next 2 days, I was a ghost in my own house. Not the dramatic kind, not the hollow-eyed, barely functioning kind, the functional kind, the kind that makes coffee at the right time, answers texts promptly, asks about your day, and listens to the answer. Derek noticed nothing different because I gave him nothing different to notice. That's a skill I'd spent 11 years building without realizing it. Turns out it's useful for more than keeping the peace. I pulled the first documents Tuesday night after we'd gone to bed. Derek was asleep inside of 20 minutes. He always slept easy, which I used to admire and now filed under a different category entirely. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and the banking app open, and I started with what Tasha told me to look for. Anything in his name alone. Any account, any filing, any asset I hadn't signed. Wednesday, I went to work, did my job, managed a crew scheduling conflict on the community center renovation without raising my voice, ate lunch at my desk, drove home, made dinner, went to bed. Thursday, while Derek was out, it was Thursday, naturally, I spread everything across the kitchen table and got to work. Tax returns for the last 3 years, mortgage documents from the original purchase and every refinance since, account statements I printed from our shared login, and statements I requested directly from the bank for anything that had Derek's name as the primary holder. I moved through the stack the way I move through a project timeline, methodically, one layer at a time, looking for the place where the numbers stop agreeing with each other. I found it in the home equity line of credit. 6 months ago, the refinance application was filed on a Tuesday in March. I was at work. I know I was at work because I cross-referenced it against my own calendar later and found a meeting I'd run that exact afternoon, a 2-hour scope review with the general contractor on the Hensley Street project. I was in a conference room talking load-bearing walls while Derek was signing documents against our house. $47,000. Maxed. Every dollar of it transferred to an account number I didn't recognize. Not our savings, not our emergency fund, not anything I'd ever seen on a statement with my name attached to it. My hands went still again. Different still than the parking lot. That stillness was shock-absorbing impact. This stillness was something colder, cleaner. The stillness of a woman who is done being surprised and has moved directly into understanding. He wasn't just cheating. He was financing it. With our house. With the equity we built, that I built over 11 years of mortgage payments and maintenance decisions, and one very significant salary sacrifice when his business went under, and I rearranged my entire professional trajectory to keep us solvent. I thought about a trip to Atlanta. 4 years ago, maybe 4.5. Derek said he had a conference. Business development, he called it. He needed to go. I'd said of course, booked the flight myself, booked the hotel myself, made sure he had the confirmation numbers in his email and $20 in cash for the cab from the airport. I worked 2 overtime shifts that month to cover what we'd spend on the trip. I wondered, sitting there at that kitchen table, who he sat next to on that plane. I set the thought down before it could take root. There was no version of that answer that helped me right now. What helped me was the folder. I photographed every document with my phone, time-stamped, clearly lit, every page. I took screenshots of every banking record and labeled each file before saving it. The equity refinance application, the transfer confirmation, the 31 Thursday withdrawals laid out in a single scrolling screenshot so the pattern was undeniable at a glance. Every piece of it organized the same way I'd organize a project handoff. Sequenced, sourced, impossible to question. You know what it feels like to build a case against your own marriage? It feels like the most competent thing you've ever done. And that is a terrible thing to feel. I called Tasha at 9:17 that night from the back porch, so Derek's television noise covered the conversation. "The equity line," I said. "He refinanced 6 months ago. 47,000. A pause. Not surprise. Tasha doesn't surprise easily. But the pause of someone recalibrating the scale of what they're dealing with. "Transferred where?" "Account I've never seen." "Okay." Her voice went into its professional register, the one she uses at work. "I'm going to get you in front of our family law attorney tomorrow. Emergency consultation. Can you be downtown by noon?" "Yes." "Bring everything you just told me, all of it, physical and digital." "Already done." I heard her exhale. Not relief exactly, more like confirmation, like something she'd been waiting to hear for longer than I knew. When I went back inside, Derek was on the couch watching a game. He looked up and smiled at me, easy, habitual, completely unbothered, and said he was thinking about getting takeout tomorrow night. "Sure," I said. "Sounds good." I went to the bedroom, set the folder beside my bag for the following morning, and got into bed. Derek came in 20 minutes later and fell asleep in 4. I lay there in the dark, eyes open, and listened to him breathe. The morning of the ceremony, I wore the gray wrap dress, the one with the clean lines. Not because I was performing anything, because I'd earned the right to look like what I was, the woman who ran that project from the ground up. 18 months of work, every delay and budget argument and last-minute scope change absorbed and managed and resolved without losing a single deadline that mattered. I put on my good earrings. I was precise about my lipstick. Derek was already gone by the time I came downstairs. He'd texted at 7. "Heading out early. See you there." I put my phone in my bag and drove to the site. The community center sat on the corner of Millard and 5th, brick and glass and new paint catching the October light. We'd strung a ribbon across the main entrance. The mayor's office sent someone. There were folding chairs arranged on the lawn, a small podium, a local news camera set up near the back. Mr. Elias Reed, my supervisor and the company's VP of operations, was already there when I arrived, talking to one of the city liaisons. He nodded when he saw me. No fuss, just acknowledgement. That was his way. I shook hands. I answered questions from the press liaison. I stood at the podium at 10:15 and spoke for 7 minutes about the project, the community it would serve, the crew that built it, the people who made it possible. I didn't stumble once. I thanked Mr. Reed. I thanked the city. I cut the ribbon cleanly, smiled for the camera, and stepped back. It was a good morning. For about 40 more minutes, it was a genuinely good morning. Derek arrived at 11:10, when the formal program was finished and guests were milling with coffee and pastries. I saw him come through the side gate, and I felt the specific tension of a person who has been holding a secret for days and is now watching it walk toward them in real time. Vivian was beside him, not touching, but close. That same close from the restaurant, the kind you don't perform, the kind you just exist in when you've stopped being careful. She had on a red coat. She looked like she'd dressed for something. You know what she never did? Looked uncertain. Not once. Derek made a lap through the guests, brief, surface level, handshakes and small talk, and he didn't introduce Vivian to anyone. He didn't have to. Her presence did everything an introduction would have done, and then some. I watched 2 of my colleagues clock the situation and exchange a look they thought was subtle. Mr. Reed saw it too. I could tell by the way he went quiet. I kept moving, coffee cup in hand, conversation to conversation, professional and unhurried. I did not look at Vivian directly. That wasn't strategy, it was accuracy. She wasn't the point. At 11:40, the crowd started to thin. People gathered their things, said their goodbyes, headed toward the parking area. The camera crew broke down their equipment. The moment I'd been managing became the moment it was no longer useful to manage. I walked to where Derek was standing near the edge of the lawn. Vivian was 3 feet to his left, watching. I kept my voice low, even. I didn't dress it up. She needs to go. Not a question, not a plea. A fact delivered with the same tone I use when I tell a contractor something can't stay on the schedule. Derek's jaw shifted. He glanced at Vivian, just briefly, and I caught it. That glance. The one that was asking for something. Permission or proof or witness, I couldn't tell which, and I realize now it didn't matter. It was the glance that told me Vivian had already said something to him today, that he hadn't arrived undecided. He grabbed my wrist. Then he slapped me across the face, hard enough to turn my head. The sound of it hit the air before I registered the impact. Then the silence came down like a door closing, total and immediate. Someone nearby pulled a sharp breath. The folding chairs, the catering table, the October air, all of it just stopped. I heard one set of footsteps, one step forward, Mr. Reed. That was all he did. One step. It was enough. I didn't look at Vivian right away, but I felt her. The stillness that was not horror. The satisfaction of a woman who had pushed for exactly this and gotten it. I straightened. I touched my face once with 2 fingers. One touch, brief and clinical, like I was confirming something. Then I dropped my hand. I looked at Derek. Not with rage. I want to be clear about that. Rage was not what I had. What I had was something colder and more useful. The absolute clarity of a woman who had spent 2 days building a folder, who had an attorney consultation on her calendar, who already knew what 31 Thursdays and $47,000 added up to. He looked back at me, waiting for something. Tears, a reaction, a collapse he could navigate. I gave him 5 words. You just lost everything. Nobody moved right away. That's the part people don't tell you about a moment like that, the way the air just holds it. 6, maybe 8 people still on that lawn, and not one of them spoke for what felt like a full minute, but was probably 4 seconds. Mr. Reed was the first. That one step forward, deliberate, quiet, a man planting himself between what just happened and what might happen next. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. I turned to the city liaison I'd been working with for 3 months. Thank you for coming, I said. Same voice I'd used all morning. I'm so proud of how this turned out. She blinked at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. Then she nodded, because that's what you do when a woman refuses to give you a scene. I shook 2 more hands. I picked up my portfolio from the chair where I'd left it. I said goodbye to Mr. Reed. I'll be in touch, those exact words. And I walked to my car without looking back. Not because I was holding myself together, because there was nothing left to hold together. The decision had already been made. All I was doing now was executing it. I got home at 12:30. Derek didn't come home that night. Didn't call, didn't text. I noticed the absence the way you notice a sound that stopped. Briefly, then not at all. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with my folder open in front of me, and I added the notes from the morning. Time, location, witnesses present, Mr. Reed's name, the name of the colleague I'd seen exchange that look. 2 sentences, specific and factual. The way I write project notes. Then I called Tasha. She picked up on the second ring. Start the paperwork, I said. A beat of silence. Not surprise. Tasha doesn't do surprise. Processing. I already started pulling what I need, she said. I've had the template ready since Tuesday. That's the thing about Tasha Odom, my closest friend since our sophomore year in college, and now a licensed paralegal at a family law firm. She respects me enough not to pretend she didn't see this coming before I did. That's a specific kind of love, the kind that doesn't waste your time. We talked for 11 minutes, practical, sequential. She told me what the attorney would need first. I told her what I had. She told me to bring everything Thursday. I said I would. After I hung up, I went upstairs and got Derek's garment bag from the closet. Let me tell you something. Moving his things didn't feel like grief. It felt like closing a browser tab. Efficient. Overdue. This was my house. My name on the mortgage before his was ever added to it. I wasn't leaving. I was establishing exactly whose space this was while the legal process caught up with the truth I already knew. I folded shirts. I stacked shoes. I worked through the closet in under 20 minutes, which tells you something about how long I'd been quietly ready for this. I was going through the pockets of his gray jacket, the one he wore to client meetings, the one I'd dry cleaned twice this year alone, when my hand closed around a folded piece of paper. I stood there for a second. My hands went still. I unfolded it. It was a down payment receipt, a condo lease, printed on a rental agency's letterhead, signed at the bottom in a signature I'd watched sign our own mortgage 11 years ago. The primary name on the lease was Vivian Price. Derek's name was listed as co-signer. The date was 2 months ago. I read it twice, not because it was complicated, because I wanted to be certain my brain was registering every single word correctly before I did anything with it. He wasn't just having an affair. He wasn't just draining our equity. He had been building a door. A furnished, co-signed, already paid for door, funded with the home we built together, and he'd been standing in our kitchen every morning waiting for the right moment to walk through it. I wonder sometimes if he had a date in mind, if he'd planned a speech. I set the receipt flat on the dresser. I photographed it, 4 shots, different angles, all in focus. I sent every image to Tasha in a single message and typed 3 words beneath them. Add it all. A response came back in under a minute. A single word. Done. I put the receipt in my folder. I finished packing his things. I moved 2 bags and the garment bag into the guest room, closed the door, and went back downstairs. At 9:47, my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Derek. I let it go to voicemail. I waited 3 minutes, then I played it. His voice filled the kitchen, measured at first, then looser, the way he got when he thought he was being reasonable and no one was pushing back. He said the slap was a reaction, that I'd provoked it by confronting him publicly, that Vivian being there wasn't what I thought it was, that I needed to calm down before I did something that would hurt both of us. He said, and I want you to really hear this, he said I was letting my emotions run the situation. The man who hit me in front of 8 witnesses and his mistress told me I was being emotional. I listened to the whole thing, every word, then I saved it. The next morning, 6 a.m. sharp, I pulled into Tasha's driveway with a folder tucked under my arm, a coffee in each hand, and 11 years of a man's choices reduced to about 40 pages of documentation. Tasha Odom, my closest friend since college and a licensed paralegal at a family law firm, opened the door before I knocked. She'd already cleared her kitchen table. A legal pad sat at the edge. Her reading glasses were on. She didn't say good morning. She just took one of the coffees and sat down. That's us. That's always been us. I opened the folder and laid it out in sequence, the way I'd stage documents for a project walkthrough. Left to right, oldest to most recent, every page time-stamped, every screenshot labeled. We started with the equity line. 6 months ago, Derek had refinanced our home equity credit line, $47,000, maxed and moved to an account I had no visibility into. The bank statements showed the transfer in 3 installments. Clean and deliberate. Not a mistake, not an oversight. A plan. "He did this while you were still making the mortgage payments," Tasha said, not a question. "On time. Every month." Her pen moved across the legal pad. We moved to the Thursday withdrawals, 31 of them. ATM cash, always between $400 and $800, always on Thursdays. I'd pulled 6 months of statements and highlighted every single one. The pattern was so clean it almost looked like a budget line. You know what it actually was? It was a lifestyle. Dinners and weekend bags and whatever else a man buys when he's auditioning for a different life on someone else's dime. Then the condo lease receipt. Tasha held it for a long moment, reading every word. She set it down carefully, the way you set something down when you don't want to disturb it. "His signature," she said. "His signature. 2 months ago. 2 months ago." She wrote something down, underlined it twice. I reached into the folder and pulled out the last piece. The text message. Vivian's message to Derek, recovered from his shared cloud account 2 days prior, when I'd quietly accessed it using the same password he'd used since 2019. "If you can't even stand up to her in public, then what are we even doing?" I remembered the first time I'd read it. I'd been sitting right where I was standing now, my own kitchen, 3 in the morning, folder open, hands steady. I had read it once. Then I had printed it, labeled it, and filed it behind the lease receipt. I slid the printout across Tasha's table. She read it. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. That's Tasha's version of furious. Everything locked in, nothing spilled. "She sent this the morning of the ribbon cutting," I said. "So he walked in already primed." "He walked in already primed." She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "And the voicemail?" I set my phone on the table and pressed play. Derek's voice filled Tasha's kitchen. The same voice I'd listened to for 11 years, across dinner tables and Sunday mornings, and 100 ordinary moments I used to think meant something. "You're letting your emotions run the situation." I watched Tasha's face while it played. She didn't move. When it ended, she picked up her pen. "That goes to the attorney today. Don't send it anywhere else. Don't share it. Just the attorney." Already planned on it. She looked at the full spread of documents laid out across her table. "Renee, the co-signed lease combined with the equity transfer, that's not just infidelity anymore. That's financial misconduct within the marriage. Depending on how the attorney reads the fraud angle, you're looking at a substantially different filing." My hands went still on the table. I already suspected it. Tasha had hinted at it 2 nights before, but hearing it said plainly, that the thing Derek did wasn't just a betrayal, it was actionable. Something in my chest went very quiet. I thought about the overtime shifts, the way I used to pack a bag lunch so we could save $40 a week when his business was bleeding. The memory hit quick and sharp. Me sitting under the fluorescent lights of a break room at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, eating a sandwich I'd made at 5 a.m., while Derek's flight to Atlanta lifted off without me even knowing I'd been paying for his seat. I set that thought down, picked up my pen instead. While Tasha made a second pot of coffee, I opened my laptop and drafted the email to Mr. Elias Reed, my direct supervisor and the company's VP of Operations. 4 sentences, no emotional language. I referenced the incident, stated I was taking 1 personal day, confirmed I would be available by phone for anything urgent, and indicated I'd like to meet privately at his earliest convenience. I didn't ask him how he felt about what he'd witnessed. I didn't apologize for the disruption. I didn't perform distress or beg for understanding. I sent it at 7:41 a.m. and closed the laptop. That afternoon, 2:30 p.m., I sat across from the family law attorney at Tasha's firm, my folder open on the desk between us. She was thorough. She read everything twice, asked 4 specific questions, and made notes I couldn't see. She didn't react to anything emotionally, which I respected. She was doing the same thing I was doing, assessing, sequencing, calculating. Then she set her pen down and looked at me directly. "Given the refinancing," she said, "we may have grounds for financial fraud within the marriage. That changes things considerably." I went still for 3 full seconds, not from shock, from the specific, clarifying weight of hearing someone with legal authority confirm what you already knew in your bones, that what happened to you was not just personal, it was prosecutable. She slid a single page across the desk, a preliminary filing timeline, clean, sequenced, exactly the kind of document I would have built myself. I picked it up, read it top to bottom, and set it down. "When do we start?" I said. I was first through the front door. 6:53 a.m. The building still had that particular quiet it holds before the day begins. Recycled air, fluorescent hum, the smell of industrial carpet that never quite leaves. I'd worked in this building for 7 years. I knew every sound it made. I set my bag at my desk, logged into my computer, and opened my project timeline for the week. I reviewed 2 contractor updates. I responded to a subcontractor email that had been sitting since Tuesday. Then I straightened my folder, picked it up, and walked to Mr. Reed's office. He was already there. He was always there early. That was one of the things I respected about him. I knocked twice on the open door. He looked up. Something crossed his face. Controlled, professional, but underneath it something that looked close to anger. Not at me, at the situation, at the fact that this situation existed at all. "Close the door," he said. I did. He'd already spoken to HR. He told me that first, before I could say anything, the way a man tells you he's handled something because he needs you to know he took it seriously. 2 witnesses from the ribbon cutting had come forward independently, unprompted. Both had given written statements. The company had them on file before 9 a.m. the previous day. I let him finish. Then I said, "I appreciate that. I wanted to hear it from you directly, and I wanted you to hear everything from me directly." He nodded. "Go ahead." So I did. I didn't perform it. I didn't arrange my face into anything particular or modulate my voice for sympathy. I told him what happened in the sequence it happened, the event, the approach, the wrist, the slap. I told him Vivian was present and that her presence was not accidental. I told him I was pursuing the matter through proper legal channels and that I had already consulted an attorney. He listened the whole time without interrupting. That's a rare thing in a man who runs operations for a living. They usually can't help themselves. But he sat with it. When I finished, he said, "What do you need from me?" You know what I didn't do? I didn't ask him to fight for me. I didn't tell him I was scared or devastated or anything else that was true but beside the point in that room. I looked at him and I said, "I need to file the formal incident report. I need Derek's name attached to what happened, officially, as a documented physical assault at a company event. That's what I need." He reached into his desk drawer and set the form in front of me without a word. I filled it out in his office. Every field: date, time, location, description of incident, names of witnesses already on record. I wrote clearly and I did not editorialize. I signed it, slid it back across the desk. He countersigned as the supervising witness. Then he said, "I'll be making a separate call this afternoon." I looked at him. "Derek's firm is on our approved vendor list," he said. "That's under review." I didn't react. I just picked up my folder, stood, and said, "Thank you for your time." That's all. That was enough. Let me tell you something about filing a piece of paper. From the outside, it looks like nothing. A form, a signature, a manila folder going into a drawer somewhere. But a document like that has a specific kind of weight. It means Derek's name now lived in a place he couldn't reach, attached to an act he couldn't explain away, witnessed by people whose accounts were already signed and dated. He thought that slap would land and disappear. He thought I would absorb it the way I'd absorbed everything else, quietly, efficiently, without consequence for him. He was wrong about that. By 3 p.m., Tasha's contact at the contracting agency confirmed what Mr. Reed had done. Derek's firm had been removed from the company's approved vendor list, effective immediately. 40% of his active business pipeline. Gone. Tasha called me while I was still at my desk. "He made the call," she said. "It's done." I didn't celebrate. I opened my folder, added a one-line notation with the date and time, and closed it again. Then I kept working. That evening, 7:15, Tasha called again. "The freeze went through," she said. "Your attorney filed it an hour ago. Joint accounts, the equity line, everything attached to both your names. He can't touch what's left. Everything's locked." I exhaled once, just once. Then I picked up my phone, pulled up Derek's number, and typed a single message. "Come home. We need to talk." I set the phone face down on the kitchen table and went to make coffee. He knocked. He actually knocked. On his own front door, in the house we'd lived in together for 9 years, the man knocked like a guest. I didn't get up. "It's open," I said. He came in looking the way men look when they've rehearsed something, shoulders back, jaw set, already building toward whatever speech he'd put together on the drive over. He was wearing the gray jacket I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago. I noticed that. I noticed everything. He stopped when he saw the table, the folder, the phone, me seated, with my hands flat and still in front of me and not a single thing on my face that gave him anything to work with. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down slow, like he was buying time. "Renee," he started, "I know you're angry, and I understand that, I do, but I think if we can just—" I slid the bank statements across the table. 31 Thursdays, I said. He looked down at them. Something shifted in his face, the rehearsed calm cracking just slightly at the edges. "Those withdrawals, okay? I can explain those. The business had some cash flow issues I didn't want to worry you with, and I was handling it. I was always planning to tell you once I had it sorted out. It wasn't—" I slid the refinancing documents across the table. $47,000. His mouth closed, opened again. "The equity line that was a business decision, Renee. I had every right to make that call. My name is on this house too, and the situation with the firm was more complicated than you—" The condo lease landed on top of everything else. "You co-signed this 2 months ago." That one stopped him cold. His eyes dropped to the paper. I watched him read his own signature. I watched him understand that I had been holding this for days, that every morning he'd sat across from me at this same table eating breakfast I'd made, I had already known. His jaw worked. That's not what it looks like. The condo was a practical decision. Vivian needed a place, and I was trying to help, and it wasn't—" I picked up my phone. I pressed play. His voice filled the kitchen. "Renee, look. I need you to calm down before this becomes something it doesn't have to be. What happened today was a reaction, okay? You pushed me into a corner in front of my colleagues and people I know, and I reacted. And yes, maybe that wasn't the right move, but if you had just—" I let it run for a few more seconds. Then I stopped it. He was staring at the phone like it had said something in a language he didn't recognize. His face had gone through 3 different expressions in the span of 10 seconds. Disbelief, calculation, something that was almost starting to look like fear. "Renee, listen to me. That voicemail. I was upset. I wasn't thinking straight. I would never characterize it that way now. If you'll just let me—" I slid the last piece of paper across the table. Vivian's text. The full message. The one that ended with, "If you can't even stand up to her in public, then what are we even doing?" I let him read it. I let him sit with exactly what it meant. You know what a man looks like when he finally understands he's been caught. Not just caught in the lie, but caught in the shape of it, the design of it. He looked like a man who'd thought he was directing something and just realized he was the prop. The slap wasn't a reaction. It was an audition. And she'd handed him the script. His voice came out quieter this time, stripped down. "Renee, you have to understand what I've been dealing with. The pressure, the business. You've always had your career, your stability, And I've been drowning, and nobody saw that. Vivian She got it. She got what I was going through in a way that you never." The attorney agrees. "Because you were always so focused on your own." He stopped, processed what I'd just said. "What attorney?" "Already filing." "Renee, come on. This doesn't have to be. We can handle this ourselves. We don't need lawyers involved. That's just going to cost us both money. We don't." "You should call someone." He stood up, sat back down, ran a hand over his face. His voice shifted again, harder now, defensive, reaching for the version of himself that had always been able to talk his way through a room. How do you have all of this? How long have you been?" I looked at him. 5 words. "I've always paid attention." He left 20 minutes later. No resolution, no negotiation. Nothing he came in with had survived the table. I heard the front door close. I listened to his car pull out of the driveway. Then I sat in the quiet of my own kitchen for a long moment. Just me, the folder, the hum of the refrigerator, and I opened my laptop. I started looking at apartments. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in the family law office on a Tuesday morning, in a chair I'd learned to think of as mine, when Tasha, my best friend and the paralegal who had made half of this possible, slid a document across the conference table and said, "He tried to contest the equity claim." I looked up for my coffee. "Tried," I said. "Past tense." She tapped the document. "His attorney filed a response Friday. Ours filed a counter this morning. It took about 4 hours for his side to go quiet." That's what happens when you walk into a courtroom with 31 Thursday bank withdrawals, a maxed equity line, and a voicemail where a man calls his own assault a reaction. You don't fight that paper trail. You survive it, if you're lucky. Derek was not going to be lucky. Let me tell you something about a woman who spent 11 years making herself indispensable. She knows how things are connected. She knows which thread, if you pull it, brings the whole structure down. Derek spent years standing on the platform I built, shaking hands with people who respected him because they respected me first. He never once understood that. The market did, though. After the vendor list removal, 2 additional clients, both of whom I'd worked with directly on previous projects, quietly pulled their contracts from Derek's firm. No dramatic calls, no explanations offered, just a silence that cost him another 30% of his active work. His business wasn't collapsing because of me. It was collapsing because it had always been built on borrowed credibility, and the source had finally stopped lending. I found out through a colleague who mentioned it in passing over lunch. I nodded, changed the subject, filed it in the back of my mind under consequences delivered. The deposition was a Wednesday. I wasn't in the room for it. I didn't need to be. Tasha was, though. Quiet in the corner the way she gets when she's paying the kind of attention that other people don't notice until it's too late. Vivian Price, the woman who had stood at my ribbon-cutting ceremony and watched Derek slap me with something close to satisfaction on her face, had to retain her own attorney the moment my attorney named her in the civil filing. Her name was on the condo lease. The lease was funded by fraudulently diverted marital equity. That's not a gray area. That's a document with a signature on it, and her signature was right there next to his. You know what the worst part was? She knew. Not a suspicion, not a half-truth she'd told herself to sleep at night. She knew. The subpoenaed messages between her and Derek made that clear. She'd asked him directly, twice, whether the money was clean. He'd told her not to worry about it. She'd chosen not to worry about it. That choice had a cost, and the cost had her name on it now. The memory of Derek pressing her lunch money into my hand on our way out the door that last anniversary trip surfaced for just a second, his thumb against my knuckles, telling me not to work too hard while he was gone. I'd packed his bag. I'd booked his flight. I used to think that was love. I know now it was inventory. I set that thought down. Tasha told me later that Vivian had tried the full routine in that deposition room. Tears at the right moments, a soft voice, careful pauses before answering, the kind that are meant to read as thoughtfulness but are actually calculation. I didn't really understand the financial arrangements. Derek handled all of that. I trusted him. But her name was on the lease, and the texts were in the record. And sitting quietly in the corner with a legal pad and 11 years of watching people underestimate Renee Calloway was my oldest friend, who missed nothing. Derek, for his part, did not protect her. He answered the questions put to him about his own exposure, drew the lines where he needed to draw them, and left Vivian standing in the exact position she'd put herself in. She had pushed him to perform loyalty in public. She had handed him the script for the slap. And when the cost of all that performing came due, he did what he had always done. He let someone else absorb it. She'd wanted to be the upgrade. She ended up being the co-defendant. Tasha called me that evening. She tried the whole routine, Tasha said. Tears, soft voice, I trusted him, the works. But her name is on the lease and the texts are in the record. The only question now is how much she owes. I sat with that for a moment. My hands were still. The apartment was quiet around me. My apartment. Small and clean and arranged exactly the way I wanted it. Every drawer where I'd put it. Good, I said. 8 weeks after the deposition, I made coffee at 6:15 a.m. the same way I always had. Same time, same 2 scoops, same quiet kitchen. Different kitchen. The apartment was smaller than the house by about 600 square feet, and I had not missed a single one of them. Every cabinet held what I decided it would hold. The mugs were on the left. The good knife was in the second drawer, not the third, because the third drawer was where I wanted it, and no one had ever bothered to learn that but me. I stood at the counter with my coffee and listened to the refrigerator hum and thought about nothing in particular. That quiet used to feel like absence. Now, it felt like something I'd earned. The promotion came on a Thursday afternoon, which felt right somehow, like the week had a sense of humor about what Thursdays used to mean to me. Mr. Reed, my supervisor and the company's VP of operations, closed his office door before he sat down. He slid a single sheet of paper across his desk. Senior Project Manager. The title was in bold at the top of the offer letter, and the number beneath it was not something I had to read twice. I looked up. I want to be clear, he said, that this isn't a gesture. Your record on the community center alone would have gotten you here. The rest of it just accelerated the timeline. I picked up the letter, read it once more, all the way through, the way you read something when you intend to sign it. Thank you for the opportunity, I said. Not, thank you for believing in me. Not, thank you for standing by me. The opportunity. He'd offered me a door based on work I had done. That was the transaction, and it deserved to be named correctly. He nodded once, and I could tell by the way he sat back that he understood the difference completely. Some men do. I signed the letter before I left his office. I was in my car by 4:15. You know what no one tells you about surviving something like this? The part that actually heals you isn't the legal win. It isn't watching someone face consequences, though I won't pretend that didn't matter. It's a Sunday afternoon on your best friend's porch with a container of fried rice going cold between you while you laugh so hard you can't catch your breath. And none of it is about him. Tasha, my best friend since college and the paralegal who had quietly held my strategy together for weeks, had a porch that faced west and caught the late afternoon light in a way that made everything look warmer than it was. We'd been sitting out there for 2 hours. The takeout bags were still on the little table between us. She was telling me about a client at her firm who had tried to hide assets in a storage unit. An actual storage unit, padlocked and everything. And I was laughing before she even got to the part where the opposing attorney subpoenaed the unit number. He packed it himself, she said, labeled the boxes. He labeled them in marker with the contents. I pressed my hand over my mouth. My eyes were watering. That was the afternoon. That was the whole afternoon. Not a deposition recap, not a strategy session, not two women sorting through the wreckage of something that had tried to break one of them. Just Tasha and her porch, and the light going gold, and something completely unrelated to any of it. 3 weeks before that Sunday, a message had come through a mutual acquaintance, someone I knew casually from a neighborhood association, not someone I would have expected. She said Vivian Price wanted to talk. Not to apologize, to explain. To be understood by the one person whose understanding she seemed to think she was still owed. My hands had gone still when I read it. Then I set my phone down, face up, and I never responded. Not because I wanted her to suffer the silence. I genuinely did not spend that much time thinking about Vivian Price, but because there was nothing she could say that would add a single thing to what I already knew. I had her messages. I had her signature. I had Tasha's notes from the deposition. Whatever explanation she needed to give, it wasn't for me. I wasn't the audience she deserved. The message sat in a folder I never opened again. The 7th anniversary dinner surfaced one more time, the way it always did when I let my guard down for a moment. That small restaurant, the red-checked tablecloth, Derek's hand covering mine, his voice quiet, telling me I made everything possible. I had believed him so completely, not because I was naive, because he had meant it then, or at least some version of him had, and I was a woman who paid attention to what people meant. I didn't regret loving him. I regretted believing the man at that table was the man he actually was. I set the thought down. I didn't pick it up again. I drove past the Riverfront Grill on a Tuesday evening in late October, on my way back from picking up a dry cleaning order I'd forgotten about for 2 weeks. I wasn't looking for it. It was just there. The awning, the lit window, the same parking lot where I had once sat with still hands and watched my marriage through glass like it belonged to someone else. I didn't slow down. I didn't turn my head. I kept driving. The rearview mirror showed me nothing I needed anymore. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!